We did want to know a little bit about SAHA because some of the artists have been here in Istanbul for several days, but they have been busy producing, and so some doing their work, and so going out into Istanbul hasn't been an option for them till they finish their work, and so we wanted them to become more familiar with some of the institutions that we have here. Also joining us today in the audience, we have Marcos Schwimmal, who's an artist, and he is visiting us in Istanbul for the day, and a good friend and a colleague, Shuman Bashar, who's on a 3-month residency with SALT. And if any of you saw the beautiful show that was at SALT Galata right before the summer, was a show that he curated in there. So they are more than welcome to join in on any part of the conversation with us. We were going to conduct this conversation in a rather casual setting, since we all finished producing and installing the show last night, literally recording the last instances yesterday afternoon, installing Lara Favaretto at 11:30 in the midnight because the truck was too big to enter Istanbul before 4. Saadane was moving text locations at about 5:40 yesterday afternoon. So I thought that maybe it would be a more interesting conversation is if I were to start a little bit by saying what the starting point of the show was, and why I feel very privileged and honored that all the artists accepted the invitation to either do an in situ piece or to send a piece for the show, and then maybe those that did the work on site here in Istanbul can speak about their work and doing this specific work in the greater context of having, their artistic trajectory. And in the case of Saadane, because
special.
Yes, everyone's yes, you're extra special this morning. Saadane is staying here for several days and soaking up the city, and because the work has always taken the shape of manifesting itself through different whether it's through the visual arts, through sculpture, through music, through poetry, I think.
Images of the works when you're talking about Saadane's work, that there should be, not here probably, but if you have anything, so that we could relate,
Actually, but no, probably on the computer, if you have the little video thing of the Apple computer, the images could be.
Projecting it might be quite difficult, just to show, so that immediately you could relate what.
What's a catalog maybe?
But
I don't want to make a lecture, maybe.
Saadane's we have, but Daria printed. Maybe just those printouts. Maybe those printouts.
But maybe.
تو باید جواب بدی من که اگه من اینو بگم سعی من داد.
Just describe the work, just briefly.
Okay.
But I think it's more time to speak more in general of the things, and not time to make a lecture.
As you all wish. You're the bosses today.
Okay. And because we are a lot, we have all to do that in a way.
So maybe just the few points that were the departure points for me is that, as many of you know, I had the pleasure of living in Turkey from 1998 to 2002, and have been coming back to Turkey since then, pretty much every year, if not twice. And it's been because of love and friendship, not really because of any other ulterior motives. Friends got married, friends had children, and biennials and really wonderful celebratory events have happened here that brought me back. And being of Iranian heritage, I'm American of Iranian heritage, the context of history and the context of being aware that we all are part of a time continuum has been something that has really preoccupied pretty much my existence probably since the revolution, since leaving Iran, that nothing occurs in a vacuum. Work is not produced in a vacuum. You're part of you're part of a kind of a timeline of thought and discovery, and it's about a journey. And I thought that for the first show in Istanbul, considering the history of this building, given the geographic location of the building in the city, that it would be respectful to find a dialogue with the neighborhood, with the fact that there is a mosque in front of us, there are churches down the street, that there's a rich history here, that we in no way are something new. We're just a new layer to that conversation. And how can we be an interesting layer of conversation to what is already a very rich context? And what better way to do it than through the work of artists that inspire, selfishly, me, and that's the privilege I had of picking the artists that were selected for this show. Starting with the cinema, maybe, actually. When I saw Philippe Perrenot's presentation at the Biennial this summer, I was really, I was moved. His films have always moved me, but I was in particular moved. And I thought that given the love for cinema in Turkey and the history of that relationship with film, that it would be nice to have a cinematic program that our narratives are really beautiful narratives, and it's called Chew the Fat. The film either comes in a multiple channel presentation or this in a 124-minute presentation. And it's really beautiful to listen to one artist having a dialogue with other artists about work and many other issues. So that was the film portion. And to, welcome us into the cinema is a beautiful work by Philippe Perrenot, the marquee piece that was produced for this show, and inspiring. On the first floor, we, once you enter the gallery, there are two access points that, in my mind, I wanted when you looked to be able to do a panoramic of the exhibition, and you look on the left and you see Saadane's sculpture and text piece, and on the other side you see Lara Favaretto with her cement, with the sculpture that she did. But at the same time, you kind of see the face of the wall with Alexander Wagner's charcoal drawing, and then to the right of Lara, you see a beautiful sculptural piece by Alicia Quade, and then your eye line is lost. On the left, you see the beautiful works, the face of beautiful works of Simon Starling, and then again you are lost, and you're kind of invited to focus on this section and to walk through it. Upon turning the corner, you can then enter, and you will find a piece by Olafur Eliasson. Maybe you can pass it around. By Olafur Eliasson, which is then flanked by a work on paper by Matt Mullican, American artist residing in Berlin. Olafur, Danish, Icelandic artist residing in Berlin and Denmark. And turning the corner, you see a beautiful work by Blattaman. Some of you might be familiar with it, but The Complete Stories of William Shakespeare. And then there's another site-specific work that was done by Hera in a waterway that once we did some discovery about the history of the building, and we could rewrite the history of the building, but 3/4 of the first floor of the gallery sits on a water cistern. And we were first told that it was a holy water well, but Hera's done some more research, and it's more, it seems like it's a cistern. So I had, when I did a studio visit with her, it seemed I'd seen a beautiful work that she had done in a cistern in Istanbul. And we thought that it would be beautiful if we tortured Tijen and dug up the ground and opened up the waterway, checked to see really where the water was, and it's at about 4.5 meters, brought it up and asked Hera to think specifically about doing the work in there. Then Abbas, Iranian, living in Toronto, did his work yesterday, which was also site-specifically prepared, and in a way there was a performance to it that not everyone saw before the show, that is a play on the alchemy of it, and I'll let him speak to it, and how that work fits into the greater context of the work that Abbas has been doing. And on this side we have Sarkis. I think the audience is very familiar. I will not dare to speak about Sarkis's work, but there's two beautiful pieces by Sarkis. And then we end at Saadane again. So the trajectory, in a way, that is the loop that it takes you. And each of the works for me were either reflective in an intellectual sense, or in a political, social, or whether they looked at other works such as literature, poetry, symmetry, light. And Cevdet's work is going to be in some ways moving around. And Cevdet's work in particular is a piece that I've been following his work for a while, and then when I saw his piece at Documenta, I started trying to make my piece with sound and beat, and kind of when I sat in his in the installation for quite a bit of time, and I went back again, I was trying to understand how it all comes together. What is it that brings that what is it that it do? And so for me it was actually discovery. I had never worked with that medium, and I asked him if he would be generous enough to think of a piece for here, and we started going down a path that led to the creation of this very site-specific project, which I think ties everything. It's extremely subtle, but if you stand very quietly, it's meant for a quiet moment, a real pause, a real reflective pause. You will hear the sound, and for me, it kind of brings it all together. And that was the intention with that work, and I think it is done. So maybe with that, if it's okay, then I can start with you, Cevdet, to talk about your work and then the creation of this work in specific in light of this exhibition, and how you came to it.
I want to ask questions, or should I just?
I think maybe a narrative is, yeah. I can prod you with questions.
Yeah, the idea starts again with the imitation, actually, like imitating the sound of something with something else, with another sound. Yeah, the older work, Shore Scene Soundtrack, as you might remember, I was using a carpet to imitate the sound of the seaside. A very simple idea, but then I was trying to reflect on some things about memory, about landscape painting, about imitation for sure, about memory, about the space of the imitation, about the time of the imitation, the material, then interactivity, then media arts, like endless, for me, endless also. Yeah, I mean, for me it was, it's kind of 5-6 years practice, and at the end we had the book, which was kind of instructions for that. I would recommend to have a look. We have some copies downstairs. Then, bir şarkı alayım. Then I've been again trying to do something myself. I think it's been last 2 years or something, as far as I remember. The moments when I have a wine glass in hand, which kind of happens sometimes, I said, professionally and also culturally too. So I mean, just as we people who have background in percussion or drumming or rhythms, we cannot stop touching places or hitting places to hear the sounds. and it's kind of a natural thing. It's mostly not with a decision, because it just happens, you know. The way of understanding the piece, and also the way of it's the good snare sound, the good snare drum sound. Kind of. So, anyways, I mean, the moment when I have so I have a wine glass in hand, and I'm just making this hit, and then a few smaller hits. And I cannot help, after some moment, I cannot help imagining some ghosts or sheep in a distance and walking to somewhere, like either climbing up or getting down or something. And of course, the moment that I realize that, and of course, as I already had a great experience, I just kind of try to master that. But not master that, but to try it better. And for sure, convince the other people in wine tables, like, hey, can you hear that? Like, to check also. And sometimes we try that as a group, which is, again, just a few hits, and then a few seconds of imagining that scene or sound. Then I had some ideas to record that also. I recorded that at home, and then I tried to do it with the band of friends. It didn't work as a group. Then I don't know exactly how it happened, but the idea was, okay, I know. So somehow the sound doesn't come from the wine glass, the tea glass or the raki glass or other kinds of glasses, I thought. So I thought there should be a relation with this form, and probably this form also, which kind of has a similarity with the typical cowbell form, or one of the most typical forms, like something like that, and a bit, how do you say? Narrow or like compressor or whatever. Yeah, then I asked to a few friends, and my mother who was in East, to bring some chimbrats. Remember, the word was already a big celebration. We call it chimbrak. And then someone, I think it was either Aslo or Arzu, said, hey, it's jingle bells, that's the same word. Like the jingle in jingle bells is the same word with the chimbrak. So then we go to yansıma words, or onomatopeia.
Yeah, onomatopeia.
So like the words in language that comes from the source of the sound, like chip chip or tuk tuk or whatever. Then, after receiving these amazing bells, and then having, by a chance, like seeing a documentary about some bell makers in Bourges, with the masters, and they're dedicated to making these, they have spatial workshops. The idea to try the same form by glass was unescapable, but we had to do that. And then very fast we connected these guys like Jamojawas, based on some makers from the old glass factory here. Then we went there and then we tried some of the forms you see downstairs. Basically, we tried to make the same dimensions, but of course it would be impossible to have the same dimension of the material as it's such. It's like this very thin metal, and then we had to make it thicker glass. But it doesn't matter, it was just like what we're going to have. Then at the end we have a couple of glasses with legs or without legs. And there are some others that I didn't use, which was only a leg, a long leg. And then finally yesterday, as I just got back, upstairs in another like reverberant room, I made a recording, 8-track recording. Like 16, it's at the end 16 seconds, but I made like something like 20 seconds. Very simple, just like a few kids performing nothing actually. And then made a mono mix, and then in an iPod. As a few weeks ago, talking about the piece, we were using an iPod in a wine glass for everybody to hear the things that we were listening. We were listening to Pompidou, live recording of Pink Floyd, I think. So we needed some volume. And this shape again helps us to make that volume with your famous reflection. So then we have the recording in an iPod in one of the glasses. It's not a piece, I would say. It's rather some artifacts from this kind of short period of experimentation, which is going to keep on, it seems. And the last one, sorry to make it long, but I was at home again, like trying this, and I wanted to try it with liquid inside, but there was no wine at home, and it just somehow sounded a great idea to try with iron, as iron is really concentrated, it's not transparent. It would mute, I thought, the glass. Plus, two bells were coming from Çanakkale, and the yogurt was coming from there also. And then at the end, I drank it, and I was once more amazed with the texture of the glass. As I never had iron in this form, it was like, I said, okay, yes, I did there also. So, hoping that these all are gonna, how do you say, it's my last sentence, so I have to think about that. To reinforce an imagination. Pause.
I think when we started talking about it, after when you were coming back from Kassel, and I had written to you that for me it was, I really wanted to work with beat and to tie it together, to make people in a way, I guess, dictate a bit of pausing, a bit of quiet. We actually had a conversation about maybe a social commentary about what the art world has become and openings. And then when you started talking about cows and bells and the masses, and we thought wines and wine glasses chinging, you know, it was also a soft commentary that within this constant movement of going to art openings and events and exhibitions, that there should be these moments of pause that take us back to looking at the work. And that in a way, this piece was very much reflective of the, you know, the social environment that we're working in. Not passing a judgment of whether it's good or bad, but simply that sometimes there's a lot of movement and not pausing to consider the interaction of work and where it is. And actually, a journalist yesterday did ask me, you know, he said that, you know, this exhibition serves the purposes of art. What can you say about reflection? Is it making a commentary about where you know, my opinion is one of many in the world, but I do think that in some ways we've sped things up too much, and we need to go back to pausing and being reflective of work and its importance. And I think that came together in this journey of trying to make the piece.
Yeah, I'm actually just telling the journey of the making of the piece.
You're right.
The things that I can speak about that is like endless.
Right.
But yeah, as a note, the glass with iron comes from here, from because I kind of thought it makes sense to work with the wine glass from here. That many people in the audience, at least in the audience, would have in their hands. And in such an object that probably until the end, last minute of your life, you can have it around, and you have thousands of different designs and shapes. And for me, it was again once more going back to this and like respect the material again. Also, I'm trying to take it to my side at the moment. Let's talk about the opening the sheep, goat, the glass, or whatever, or this ritual of having drinks, and maybe we're going to make fun of this like 30 years later. We're not going to have this open form. And we will say, hey, in the early 2000s, we were together in some white spaces in Karakay, and then we're going to, but I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the joy of once more thinking about the material again, and then see the craftsman with big respect. Who does this? Who does one of the glasses just 30 seconds or something? Just as a performer again. And then someone takes it, someone puts it inside. So it was an amazing moment, and then to make the comparison with the same shape but in metal. So yeah, just to take the talk to the left side.
To the left
right
side, or the right side.
Right or left?
Whichever side. Well, with that, I think it would be a good segue to you, Saadane, to talk about Untitled Ghost and kind of the cross section of poetry, sculpture,
Yes.
literature?
I will try. So basically, I've been invited on this exhibition by chance. Most of my work, speaking more or less about reflection or using reflection, so it was not so difficult for me to find something to offer for this exhibition. This is in the perspective as well of having here soon, but this year or the coming year, a solo exhibition. So for me it was as well, I was looking for something who can represent my work, a flag piece or flag work, something like that. So I decided to show this one. We have been presented in Vite de Vite 3 years ago. It's a kind of resume, bit complex resume about all the process and different steps of the process of my work, inside my work, putting together in one body of work, which is what we see here. But first I would like to, because this is, I don't want to make a lecture about my work, but basically the main question inside my work is a question like we all dealing with is when we're facing, it's a very, very basic question, that when we're facing a piece of art, how we integrate this piece of art with our own language, with our own culture, inside our reflection. So we are every time confronted to that. A piece of art is every time something very enigmatic, very any kind. I mean, any kind of object are produced by someone and putting there in front of, in between us, are something that we have to deal with. We're trying to understand it. We're trying to. So that's why I think often the words and language is a kind of natural extension of art and a piece of art. And so me, like 7 years ago, 8 years ago, I decided to control this language coming from, kind of control, or to use it as well as a form, and to control this language, which could be this extension of my work, to create, to produce, to use it as well as for its potential of poetry, of poetic, to potential of extension of the meaning of the work and the poetic possibilities of, which is still something I don't want to explain as I would say, like, as I can explain a recipe, or I can explain, this is...
Maybe better, why did you want to control?
Yeah, because so this natural extension of the artwork, which is the language, because we're all sharing this language to give a quality of to what we are looking all together, which is still something very enigmatic. There are some specialists of this language in the art world who are creating commentary, which are like the basic. It could be the press release, the commercial commentary. So there were all these things have been a bit institutional and things like that. Was starting to bore me. It was quite boring to facing every time the same word and the same idea of trying to explain a work. And so I decided to go through the poetic language, like a songs of text like that. Everybody understands that a poetry is not something, it's not an explanation, and as well it's something we can give, we can say something about something, we can tell something about something. So I start to go in that way, to create extension or reflection about my work with this system of commission to other people, and asking them to write text, a poetic text, by confronting with them the idea and the thing I wanted to express through an object, through artwork or something like that. That's how those things came in.
How does that process happen when how does that interaction happen when you're asking someone else to write words or in some way express in an oral form or in a written form?
Basically, it was like the first time was completely an experience. Like I didn't know where I'm going. And it became something very strong in the work because after the words have been produced by someone else on the work, they bring part of the imaginary of someone else, and they bring inside the system of the work, the process of the work. So after, it was easy to restart from those words as well to create something else and creating something else. And so after I just follow the wire of this process to develop from one object of art to a performance, to develop a lot of things with the language in between. And this creation of language, this production of language, but this production of language is not this kind of commentary produced by the art scene, but it's commentary. It's a production built inside the work, with the work, for the work, and to produce something which is not under control at the end. Language is wild.
Which is what I think is interesting, that when you started, you say in a way to control this language, but actually the process makes it that you're actually you're letting it go into, you're letting it out.
After it's full of surprise, of course. There are like, I don't know, there are rules, and so I know I give the form of my work through some rules. And after, of course, inside the rules, there are a lot of space for the imaginary of the other, for integrating a collaboration. So this is how the things are going after, step by step. And so the very artwork we have like downstairs is like it's coming from 5 different moments of presenting those work, and it's putting all together. So it's creating kind of strong body of relation, and everything is related. The words are related, and in a way, I hope it's producing something very abstract, in the sense of, for me, it's difficult to deal with abstraction now as a genre, or as something. When you look at the abstract thing on the wall, it's immediately an image, because we are so used to look at abstraction now that is producing. So the abstraction idea could be developed with other kind of assemblage or collage in between words and So it's another question, it's long things. I don't want to make a lecture. Basically, this is what I can say.
Thank you. Maybe Abbas, we could talk about, go towards you and talk about your work and bringing together the narrative. I do think it would be interesting to maybe all of you to then maybe make a comment at the end after everyone has spoken about whether we think that the public or people, all of us, are more forgiving of literature or poetry or other forms of expression, whereas we're always seeming to need some kind of an explanation of an artwork. If someone can't explain to you something, then something is lost, rather than just having humility before the work and not needing to be an expert at anything. But maybe since yours moves between the worlds as well, maybe you can talk about that and then its manifestation with the alchemy part.
Sure. I'll just maybe talk about how I arrived at it to make the piece. First, thanks to you and Mana. It's been a pleasure working here. I finished my studies in Vancouver. This is a bit of an anecdotal story as to how I came to work with gold. And I remember having a conversation with this writer, Jeff Dirksen, and we were talking about how post 9/11, the biggest investments were in gold and art, and that became a kind of an urgent purchase, which was kind of a interesting thing to learn about, because I thought it's funny that we go to abstraction, and then of course after the presumption was that investing in property is the best thing to do, and then after the market economy crash, property became equally as worthless, so art and gold became the biggest investment. So this was kind of lingering in my brain, just actually, it was from 2004 we had this conversation. And then I wanted to work with gold for a while, but I didn't really touch it. I was, coming from Iran, my mom wore a lot of gold, so I found it quite garish. And actually, I think it's, there's this kind of, when you move to Canada and you're from Iran, gold becomes like an association with this kind of strange history. And I remember, and I don't know if she wants me to share this, but when we were coming to Turkey, when I was a kid, we used to drive to Turkey a lot. And my first memory of gold was this. My mom had this beautiful necklace, and you weren't allowed to bring gold across the border. And she went to the bathroom and came out, and I was like, "Where's your necklace?" And she was like, "Oh, don't worry about it, I don't have a necklace." And then we went to the border. So she was actually bringing, it was a very special piece of jewelry, she wasn't selling it. But the assumption was that when you bring it to Turkey, you're trying to sell Iranian gold at the time. So I was really young. That's my first memory of gold, like her hiding it in her cavity to actually smuggle it to Turkey, just to wear it for the aesthetic. And then when we moved to Canada in the airport, in the airplane, she lost the jewelry. As we were getting off the plane, she freaked out. This was like 10 years later, or 5 years later. So those are the two memories of like hiding gold, losing gold. They're kind of irrelevant to what I'm going to talk about, but so I was in Vancouver after I was teaching for about 2 years at a university at Emily-Carr, and then I decided to give up my job and move to Toronto because I really disliked living in Vancouver. And at the same time, I was in dialogue with Third Line to do an exhibition, and I thought maybe Dubai is a good place to talk about gold, real estate, art, investment, because all of those things are an abstraction there. So I was working on a project where there was a really large wall that was 1,000 square feet, and with fake gold, we gold leafed Dubai's real estate, or Dubai's islands, all of the waterfront property essentially, and then
An aerial map. It was like an aerial map.
Yeah, and then it was fake gold leaf, and it was all the islands before the economy crash that was promised. And then of course I was showing in 2010, and so since the economy had crashed, a lot of those things had gone under, or actually were literally going under because of just nature kind of taking back the land. So the islands were sinking, and a lot of the...
Because they were man-made.
Yeah.
They were trying to create more beachfront property, so they were completely manipulating the environment, and the environment was biting them back.
Yeah. So, and I usually make site-specific work, and in this case, it was my first time showing in a commercial gallery for a solo show. And I thought, well, let's make all of those things transparent. So I said I want to work with gold, and the premise of the show was that every time a piece of the wall sold, the wall was sectioned off, that night we would cut that piece of the drywall out, and it would leave the gallery. And then so it was like real estate. We were selling an abstract idea. And so gold started to kind of factor in that sense, where it was equated to property, art, my value, the gallery's literal wall. And of course it has its own economy in itself, is that when you bought it because it was fake gold, it's now oxidizing. So it's actually losing its value as gold, and it's gaining value as an artwork. So there were all these things I was thinking about. And across those walls was another series of work I was trying to make with real gold, 22 karat gold leaf, where I photocopied the nomadic economy of the Gulf area, pre-oil and land. And basically it was a lot of sheep, lots of herding images, and I was gold leafing the photocopies with 22 and 24 karat gold, just the really, really small details, very small things. So I quit my job, I moved to Toronto, and the show was coming up, and I had no money at all, and I was surprised by how poor I became, and I was trying to work with gold. And so I kept I was like, yeah, I'm going to send you the work, and I had no money to buy any food, nor gold, for that matter. And so a friend of a friend was like, oh, I have a bar, and if you want to come and help, we can get something, here. So I thought I might go and stock beer bottles and bar back, basically. And I thought, okay, I've done this before I was in university. I used to do a lot of waitering and bartending and stuff. So then when I arrived, she was like, oh, we need the floors clean, and it was a big bar, very big bar. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll clean. So we cleaned the floors, and there was a lot of laborious work. And then the second day I went back, and I couldn't couldn't say no because it was kind of like a mutual favor. Like she was doing me a favor by giving me odd jobs. And then I went back the next day and she was like, oh, clean this bar again, and then the bathrooms have to be done. And I was like, I'm not above this. I've done this before too. But when I opened the bathroom doors, actually there were no doors on the bathroom because they were painting the doors. So when I went to the bathroom to clean the bathroom, I realized there was like 10 stalls for men and 10 for women. Or 7 for men and 3 urinals. And I was like, again, whatever, we all clean bathrooms. But it was the speed and depth of having an office at a university to being very happy to be allowed to clean toilets. There was this kind of a discrepancy there. I was like, oh, I fell really fast, really hard. But I cleaned the bathroom, and that was, I just needed those 2 days to, and the bathrooms were remarkably dirty actually. And it was that, so I took the money from that day, it was in the afternoon, and I went and bought some food, groceries, and then the rest of it I bought gold with. And it was my first time buying gold. And then ever actually. And then I went home and did one of the photocopies, gold leaflet, scanned it, sent it to the gallery, and I was like, this is what I'm gonna make. We haven't made the wall yet. I was just like, this is the first sketch for the show. And they're like, oh, we like it. Actually, we might purchase this right away. So immediately there was this kind of like transaction from shit to art, and gold became a kind of a, and so I cleaned shit, I got gold, and then I made it worth more into an artwork. So the gold gained more value. And it was like a very, very short incline, but very fast. So it was like, and then I was in Toulouse, and I was still thinking, and then this show happened, and it was very nice. And then 2010, after the show, I went to Toulouse. I did a residency there, and I wanted to work with pigeons, and it didn't work out. And then I wanted to do this piece with alchemy, because I was still thinking about how, like, as artists, we kind of sometimes do like petty magic tricks with economy. And so alchemy was on my mind a lot. And then, so the piece is actually a kind of a reverse of artwork to gold to shit in some ways. Because what happens is I apply the text on the wall, which is a very famous line from alchemy, which is what is above is as that which is below, and what is below is as that which is above. So it's about like the purification of the body, the metals, heavens and earth. It's very kind of a cliche, kind of a common saying. And in this case, I'm reversing it in that when I install the work, I lick the upper sentence, which is actually the lower sentence from the traditional sentence. I reverse the sentences. So I eat the gold, and then I leave the bottom part. And so maybe the audience members can, some people touch it, some people blow on it. But I also really like how the gold itself materially had this, going back to kind of just talking about materials, there's a history of seduction with gold. And it doesn't have a value in the sense that silver does, because silver can be used into industry, but gold can't really have those same. It has less of a value in that sense. But in this case, it's also really materially seductive in that when the breeze comes in the gallery, the piece just kind of like does this and pulls you forward or pushes you away. So that's how I arrived at the piece.
Actually, once Kiki Smith, I did a show with Kiki Smith, an American artist, and it occurred to me to make the invite pitch black and put her name in gold. And she was completely offended, horrified, because it takes more effort. Per ounce, it costs more human effort to produce gold than it is other materials. I then had to do a whole research on silver because she asked me to do it in silver, and realized that it really takes very, very much the same amount. But gold is something that a lot of production goes to, and in the post-crisis era, gold has not only held its price, but it has increased in such tremendous levels, as has silver. So it has been something that our new economies completely propelled.
Can I add something?
Sure.
In Turkey, there's a tendency to, I don't know if it's internationally like that, but people tend to collect gold rather than, traditional families, I'm sure it's the same in Iran. They buy gold, but they don't put their money in the bank.
No.
And every month, everyone buys gold.
Absolutely.
Even I buy gold from the wage that I get.
Yes.
Just one, so that, it's just an investment. It's very traditional. And at the moment, banks are, everyone's advertising about investing the gold that you have collected in your home, and they say, bring it to the bank, so that you will it will increase in investment. So they're trying to get people to bring, I don't know, the amount of gold that they've collected through the years to the bank again, because they say it's unstated economy because no one knows how much they've collected, and I mean that's why I think it's also very relevant in Turkey also to have.
It's true, and I mean, and I was aware of this because I myself, in Iran, every year for New Year and for your birthday, you get bracelets. You get, and there's no 18 karat. There's none of that exists. It's all 22 and above. So you get, and so when I arrived to a certain age, I kind of went to my mom and I'm like, when am I going to get my bracelets? When can I wear my bracelets? And I'm not very girly in that way, but I still wanted my bracelets. She says, what are you talking about? Those were sold. And I'm like, but they were bracelets. And they're like, no, they were gold. So it was all in the disguise of I was getting, coins. You either got coins, in New Year you got coins, and here you have them as well, or bracelets, but really none of it was for me. It was sold, when the revolution hit, so it does have that. And with that, we go to Hera and the work that she did, site-specific, that really started with this obsession with the building and the history, and Asli, Seven from the gallery, who we worked very closely together, fomented that research of trying to find out more about the history. So maybe you can talk about your artistic production.
Well, actually, maybe it would be better to talk about the previous work I did with
That's
the
true.
cistern.
Yeah.
That work I did on with this exhibition series, Lives and Works in Istanbul, a 2010 organization. And this work, the concept was to work on the 5 elements, and I wanted to undertake the water as which has a great connection with the city, because the water is kind of it connects both continents. It's kind of connective aspect, and also divides many cultures, on language-wise and political-wise. And I was searching for a space which has a connection with water, but I didn't want it to be something which is very visible, like this basilica cistern or whatever. And while I was working about my project, I found this hidden cistern under a carpet shop. And one of my installation was a long carpet, which was written the word breath in 12 different languages. And the idea was to breathe under the ground and to keep on your life like that. And the cisterns are like they are storing water, and it's a life going on under the world, which we are not somehow aware of it. It's an invisible fact. And within this cistern there were actually no water except one corner, and all the people who were coming, they were instantly feeling the need to throw these coins to make a wish into the water. And I realized that there are so many different currencies, and that's the point where it's, again, the water connects many different cultures as the different currencies. So I wrote a quotation like places water holds together with those coins, but within time, again, as people were keep on throwing the coins, it again became distracted. And coming back to this project over here, when they told me that there is a possibility of a water of an ayazma under the gallery, and we saw this 50 to 55 square on the floor. So what I was thinking, I was trying to relate to that work, and the first idea was what if I could use it as a performative space, rather than looking very much decorative like with those coins. But what I thought that when we look from those two circles, we could see the bottom, but which is like 7 meters. When we just measured, like the 7th meter was the water just touching the meter, you know. So
4.5. We hit it at 453.
But it was 7 after some time, when we just went more down, and you know, it was at least this much of water. So what I thought that my basic idea was to reveal something invisible into visible, and according to the city, but many other places in the world, we just walk on the street, but under the street or under the floor that we walk, there is a hidden truth also that we don't realize, or it's kind of invisible. So the water could become that invisible floor somehow that I tried to reveal a kind of the history or the memory of the space somehow. Not only the space, but the whole city of our lives and the time aspect also. So I decided to fill that space with water only and to make a kind of illusion of the floor, which could be the zero level of the floor. And when I saw those two holes, I was thinking how I could relate with money, because this whole area is, even from Byzantine times, Ottoman times, up till now even, there is a kind of trade relation still with different cultures like Italians, Genevesians at Byzantine period, and Ottomans still going on, with Jewish, Russians still going on, and many different cultures, and Greek. So I tried to find those currencies which were residing in this area, and I started to play with the coins. And then I realized that between those two holes I could make the form of the eternity symbol actually. And water is something, as this culture is still going on with this neighborhood within history, so it means that water is this lively effect and it's still eternal, and it's still continuing the cycle of this connectivity of the cultures, you know. So that's about the work actually.
Thank you.
And I think the illusion of the effect worked quite well yesterday, because there were people who were not aware of it, and they tried to step on the work.
They did.
Which was really something what I wanted to achieve. So.
Very much true.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hera. And with that, I think we circle back to you, Alexander, and the site-specific work that you did. And not only, I think there are several threads that are obsessions of mine, and I think they come through each of the works. I think I'm awed by research, and if you really look at all of your works, they're very, whether they're reflective in your own ways, whether it is through poetry or history or economy, but they also take a tremendous amount of labor. I'm very concerned about this, and I don't know where it comes from, but the labor, the work that we do in relation to other labor that happens, you know, people that have to truly labor the way, you know, Abbas was explaining. But this work physically took 6 days of putting up on the wall for Alexander, you know, of being there. I mean, it was a physically exhausting work. So maybe also, as you talk about your work, and everyone here is so incredibly young, but you know, as you talk about your work, and then within the context of preparing it for such a large space that I asked you to do.
Well, fortunately, I had the opportunity to work with 2 assistants who were very helpful and great. Otherwise, I think I would not have made it in 6 days. So, but actually, this piece comes from the material that I usually use. I do drawings on paper mainly. I use graphite, I use acrylic, I use spray paint. Actually, I use any kind of paint that is available around in my studio. And during the process of painting or drawing, I came to use the graphite, which is like a stick. It's like 12 centimeters long. And when I was executing drawing with the stick, I somehow found this surface that you see downstairs on the wall, because it gets this very beautiful reflection when you put this pressure on the paper. You have you see the lines, but it also forms a kind of a black surface. So depending on the angle you look at it, you will have a different appearance. It might look bright if the light gets reflected in this graphite, or from another angle it will look completely dark. So you have kind of a very playful materiality surface that I really liked. And so the decision to do this on a huge wall came up when I had a solo show in Berlin. I was installing my framed drawings. They were all about like this size. And so we would put them like really high and really low, so the audience would have to do an effort to look at it, and they had to go and look up and look down. So it was really like a physical experience the audience would have. And so I came up with the idea to kind of activate the whole space by drawing directly on the wall. So the single pieces, the single drawings would themselves be reflected in this kind of bigger wall. And so here it's actually the audience comes into the space and they themselves get reflected by the wall. So, and they, like the wall also changes. When you enter now, it will look completely different than during the opening situation. And so it's basically that the person who's in front of the piece looking at it becomes part of the drawing becomes part of the architecture, so it's kind of a medium between audience, space, drawing, abstraction. This were actually the thoughts I had when I executed the piece.
I don't know if there's, if there are other questions that maybe you all are interested in asking specifically about any of the works or thoughts or comments from colleagues. If not, how would you like to proceed, Merve? Should we then thank?
So, yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to thank you for Valerie Mana, Aslı, Arzu, and Tijen and all the team. And I would like to thank Menteş for creating such a great gallery, living in Istanbul and making all the effort to sustain this gallery. Abaseh, my dear, thank you for this great show. It sets a new standard for the city, I believe. It's a music quality show. And I would like to thank most importantly to the artists for reflecting the production of their beautiful minds, and the reflection will stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.